let's go to the next slide, if that's all right.
Oh, God.
So is this starting to kind of sink in, like what this is, and you know how that could really start to, you know, impact things, and where maybe, again, if these trends hold, you know, true, 2, 3, 5 years down the road, a lot of what we're dealing with might be radically different. I mean, if nothing else, just to, you know, go back to that example of how we buy and sell homes. You know, we may not be partaking in this traditional system that served us for the last 60, 70 years, but now there's a new way of doing it. Right, so you're seeing just how powerful, you know, this might be.
When you said you had a latency of some of these transactions of 5 to 8 minutes, while that transaction is processing, is it less secure?
Not inherently so, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's a place where hackers might try to, you know, insert themselves. I mean, there could be something with just that proof of work where they're being able to come in and say, oh, no, I'm going to do this verification, but I'm going to say that player B is me, and I'm getting that money instead of somebody else.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know from the technical standpoint exactly how close they might be to accomplishing, you know, something like that, or truly if that could be done. But like I said, I think, you know, all bets are off when you know, think about the human mind for accomplishing its you know, its goals, its ends, and just the human mind's, you know, potential for creativity and tenacity. You know, especially as this takes off. I mean, look, for a long time, Apple was considered to be really much more secure than a PC because you didn't see as many hacking instances. It wasn't so much that it was just that much more secure. It's just that this many people own PCs, this many people own, you know, Apple products. So if you're going to make a big dent in something, I'm going to go to the PC world. So as this gets more and more, you know, interest and traction, I think that we're going to start to figure out where those little security loopholes are, and it's going to be your typical cat and mouse kind of thing between, oh, they found a way to breach, okay, we've closed that hole, now they found another one, and that is life, as far as I know. Go ahead.
If I may add to answer your question, there is something with, specifically with Bitcoin called the Lightning Network, which will increase transaction speed. Currently, if you and I were going to sit here and do a Bitcoin transaction, we'd be spending 5, 10, 15 minutes of small talk while the transaction is verified.
And sometimes longer. You know, I know of an instance where it took almost 24 hours for a transaction to be verified.
Yeah.
And what's funny is the value, at least within that the world of Bitcoin, this might be different for some of the other currencies. It's not the value at when the transaction took place. It's the value at when it was verified, which was different. And actually, in this guy's instance, he benefited from that. But you could imagine, you know, the fallout if that was the other way around.
Yeah.
And especially in light of some of the volatility. I mean, shoot, you could be, you know, hey, I'm getting 10 grand. Well, what do you mean I got 6 grand now? Where'd the other 4 go?
Yeah.
You know, so this is some of the interesting aspects of this brave new world. But so, right, we talked about the coins, and that was one of the reasons I wanted to bring that up is you know, a big part with a lot of these coins is the encryption. You know, I've got a store of value. I've got this unit of value, but it's you know, not transparent. It's not visible. Who owns that? Right? I mean, you know, think of all the people that are owning, you know, Bitcoin currency or the other currencies that are encrypted. And, well, I mean, for example, a lot of those people are not trying to raise their hand and partake in too many really visible transactions because there could be a you know, capital gains tax moment, right? So there's, you know, at any rate, you know, one of the aspects as to, you know, the benefit of that encryption. But just knowing that, you know, they're opaque, they're not visible, they're not transparent, that's been really kind of more or less relegated to the realm of coins so far. What you could see happen, and this is some of these things that people are starting to kind of nip at the edges of this, but this is some of the stuff that could really unfold, and I forget which gentleman it was that made this comment, but, you know, just like you've got these coins where it's encrypted and secure, nobody knows, you know, who's holding that, you could start to see these encrypted processes, you know, create crypto markets, create crypto transactional. I mean, essentially kind of like you had on the dark web, but with blockchain technologies could even be, you know, much more nimble. And again, you know, in the hands of developers, there's no telling what might be getting put out there. But I'm sure, you know, whether it's for nefarious purposes or just because people want to have, you know, privacy or secrecy, what have you, they are going to start to build these transactional processes that are essentially opaque, that are not visible. And so when I'm going back to those libertarian values and ideals of less government in our lives, right, and empowering the individual, I mean, this directly speaks to that. I mean, it could even be something where, mean, really from a concept standpoint that you could buy and sell a house and have that not be a visible transaction that's inherent to its own little, blockchain ecosystem, that's one aspect. Let's think about political donations, right? Money is voice in some ways. It's very transparent, nowadays as well, to some extent, with the super PACs and all the rest, that certainly changes things. But now you can have a political donation framework where nobody's having to announce what they're doing. Let me ask you guys this, especially within the libertarian realm. I know that that's a value where, and there's a lot of technologists there, and you're thinking about coins, you're thinking about currency. When is there going to be a libertarian party blockchain donation framework?
Ooh. I believe the Libertarian Party already accepts Bitcoin.
But let's talk about a dark process. Right? So they're still having to announce they received X amount, in Bitcoin. But what if, there's processes where political parties aren't even having to, it's just not something that anybody's privy to or able to see. Go ahead.
Didn't I stir up a longer conversation when I said the government won't be able to tax us?
You could have employment frameworks. You're working for somebody, you're paid, you're consistently, receiving that check. You feel secure in this because it's part of this blockchain process with the ledger and all the rest. But if somebody didn't want to raise their hand and say, hey, this is something visible to the government, that would be a nimble way of achieving that end. And this is, and I'm sure the government is very, very scared of this because it's a loss of control. It's certainly in a lot of aspects a loss of tax revenue or fees or what have you. I foresee that they'll probably outlaw a lot of the stuff through legislation, but it's, in a lot of ways, really what you're thinking about here is almost creating a black market. But now you've got a tool to make that much, much more easily accomplished. Go ahead.
A few days ago, it came across the news that Edward Snowden had shown that the NSA is indeed very interested in tracking Bitcoin transactions, and they evidently are spending quite a bit of effort in actually doing so, because Bitcoin is only pseudonymous in that there are ways of taking any particular Bitcoin address, number, whatever, and figuring out who it belongs to, and that's one of the things that evidently NSA is working really hard on.
Yeah, doesn't surprise me. And again, not just from a tax revenue, standpoint, but also look at, I don't know, it's probably anybody's guesses, but probably 20, 30, 40% of the amount of capital flowing through those channels, or within a certain currency like Bitcoin, might be laundered money or money that came from who knows where. So certainly it's always governments trying to keep track of those aspects. So none of this surprised me. It's essentially an arms race. You've got this new technology, much more secure, really changes things, as far as how you figure out who's doing what. And that's still part of that cat and mouse game. Well, the government's going to try to say, let us, get some insight into this. And even, another step back, and I'll call it just say, communication. Encrypted services. This could be much more easily done as far as just simple communications. I know that there's been a lot of pushback and resistance and concern about already, these encrypted services. But again, now with especially if you're using a blockchain to create a dark or I use dark as opposed to black, but this opaque, not visible market, and all these different areas, these are things that can be done. It's now you're starting to see, and look, like I said, there's limitations on blockchain, and maybe next month, there's some new technology that comes out that's even more advanced or radically different, or, another paradigm shift that's even, a better step up than what the blockchain represents. So who knows, where things are going to be at 2, 3, 5 years from now, if blockchain is really going to be the relevant technology. But assuming that it is, and as you're starting to kind of get a grasp of what it is and how this could play out, now you're starting to see where this could really fundamentally, radically alter so many aspects of our lives, especially when it comes to, keep going back to these dark markets. But again, I anticipate legislation. Go ahead.
So the way that the U.S. government in particular is dealing with that threat currently is they well, last year they actually seized the assets of one of the Bitcoin trading exchanges, BTC-E, and currently they are hot and heavy in trying to get another fifth largest cryptocurrency exchange called Bitfinex. They're trying to really push on making sure that they have in place good so-called know your customer and anti-money laundering laws, which is actually their way of saying we need to know what's going on. And of course, they always have a convenient excuse for why they need to know that.
Yeah. Well, just like they're looking to outlaw, any black market. I mean, it's going to be the same approach here. But I'm sure, we can certainly step off on the deep end as far as speculation. But, if I was a government entity and I was looking to have some sort of control or insight into that, I'd be looking to flip engineers. Give us a back door into the code, right? I mean, I'm sure they're not going to be talking about that in like a newspaper article or this or that. But, if you can't get into the box, maybe you can talk to the person that's building the box and say, hey, build me a little back-end portal, right? And I foresee probably a lot of stuff there to where, maybe in some ways the FBI or the CIA is using some of their spy craft resources, the way you work the human intel aspect, to get into those systems, So,
well, as I mentioned right at the very beginning, that may have already happened with very design Bitcoin. We just simply don't know.
Exactly. Yeah. Or we don't even know if maybe the founders are, we don't, all the coins haven't been accounted for. Maybe they're getting a little, every time there's a transaction, a little something lining their pocket. They built the code. There's a lot that we can't see.
Yep.
All bets are off, when it comes to the human element, as far as I'm concerned. Let's hit the next slide.
Yeah.
I've just got a few more here. You guys still with me here? I'm not putting anybody to sleep, at least not too much.
Oh, wow, it worked. Good job.
So long-term impact, another key area is going to be decentralized digital identities. There's a lot of interest here, as far as who you are, where that information is stored, who has control over it. Right now, probably a lot of that's just distributed all over the place. You've got whatever records with the government, you've got your health records, you've got your credit score. At some point, this might be that everybody gets their own just that digital identity. Since you block on a blockchain that is Philip Kranefuss, that has all my pertinence, where I control that information and decide who sees what, when they need to see it, what have you. Right. So getting back to the role of government in our lives, greater control over personal liberties, personal freedoms. Certainly, that's an area as far as that enhancement of personal privacy, security, and control of identity. That could radically shift things as well.
There was a fascinating article in Wired, in one of the more recent issues, and basically in China, you already have a digital FICO score.
Yep.
And really
a social score, essentially. Yeah.
Social score. And there are people. I saw a white paper a couple of weeks ago, just in Boulder, somebody presenting on how we would be implementing that here as a kind of social network, validate everybody's identity and everybody's creditworthiness.
And it can be scary because on the one hand it can lead to greater personal freedom, what have you. On the other hand, it can lead to people, like in China. That's certainly not a regime that I'd like to live under, where I've got this, essentially it's like when they used to talk about your permanent record in school.
Yeah.
And this has access to the types of jobs, the types of opportunities that you have in life, your social station, and all of a sudden now they've got a much more firm way of tracking who I am in accordance with the rules that they set forth. So that's the flip side, where in certain ways that this could play out, our personal freedoms might be further, impinged.
Where did you say you saw that?
Ralph, can we get the next slide?
It's probably like the January issue of Wired magazine.
Wired. Got it. Wired.
And guys, I'm in the home stretch here, so we're kind of getting through this. One other aspect is the decoupling of financial systems from state players. Typically used to be that who had the framework, for offering a currency, who could establish the trust within that currency because it was either backed by a gold standard or just backed by, the health of that government and national entity itself. Right? But now we're seeing all these currencies come out. Anybody can build a coin nowadays, just about, as long as they're savvy and you can code. Right? And so there might be a mechanism where, frankly, things unfold and that we're not so beholden to the U.S. dollar or, the ruble or the yen or, whatever it might be. So essentially, that decoupling of financial systems with these processes, with coins that are inherent to themselves, and not those typical players that back a currency, that could be another very interesting development.
I just like to illuminate for a moment what you said about anybody can write blockchain code.
Elf, just come see me.
I would like to point out to those who are computer literate that the essence of blockchain code is about 20 lines of Ruby code, maybe 100 lines of C++ code.
Yeah.
It's really short. It's publicly available, which is why there are so many blockchain players. So it's not the blockchain code that's difficult, it's everything around it, just getting you, mostly publicizing your stuff.
Marketing.
Yeah, getting interest.
Marketing.
Yeah.
So you need your electric bill must be pretty high.
I'm not currently mining.
Yeah, it's
any
the mining that's for
cryptocurrencies.
real.
Although I do have a mining rig, I'm not currently running it because it's at this point 3 years out of date.
So I think that's a very key aspect, especially when it comes to currency, and what that means is current state. And if this is no longer so inherently tied to a state player, very, very interesting.
And just to talk about this interesting thing that's happening is these financial systems that are starting to be regulated by the United States are creating opportunities for other nation states to kind of be like the place to go for these types of opportunities. So now you're seeing global players like a lot of blockchain companies want to start their ICOs in Singapore or other countries,
With legislation.
which is actually kind of creating a competition within global nation states, which could be beneficial for individuals.
Yeah. You typically didn't have that nature competition
for freedom.
between. Yeah.
On that issue, I have a question, which is Venezuela offered its petro about a month ago. I have heard nothing about it. Okay,
Except that they outlawed it here.
What happened to it?
What is
It's
the
been outlawed by Trump.
Well, he did an
For the-
executive order.
Yeah,
Yes.
for the U.S. government for anyone in the U.S. to deal in petrodollars.
And my speculation on that is, I'm sure there's people playing in it. I will be the first to admit I haven't gotten way deep into this, but I think it's still Venezuela, right? And it's still oil and gas. It's a little bit different scenario when barrel of oil was about 10, about 20, versus where it is now. I think 65, 70, something like that. Not to mention the whole trouble with Venezuela was when, and a lot of the countries was when barrel of oil dropped to about $40 or below, right? That's what they made a lot of structural, I think, bad moves under the Chavez regime, and now Maduro is less capable of a leader, and he's got all these financial concerns. But my guess is it probably hasn't taken off too much because Venezuela is probably not a hotbed of currency speculation at the moment. Maybe if we saw greater volatility, oil and gas prices, people might be trading in and out of that. But right now, gas is kind of hovering at a point that's not all that attractive. It's somewhat attractive, but from that standpoint, to make somebody say, I'm going to take all my money and put that in the Venezuelan, the petro, that their e-currency. I don't think that just by its very nature there's that much of an attraction there. Plus, you're looking at, it's one thing when there's like a handful of coins. Hey, where do I play? Is this Dogecoin? Is this Bitcoin? Is this Ethereum? Now it's just a proliferation, 1,500 plus. It's a little bit harder to have a hit, so to speak, even if you are Venezuela. So very interesting though the way that's going on. Let's go to the next slide. And I think I just got a slide or two left, and then
You have something on the last slide about new forms of citizenship.
Oh yeah.
What do you anticipate?
Well, when you think about what we needed the state for, provide a secure financial ecosystem, within which to play, to have our rights secured, backed by that nation state. a lot of those things that we look at, in our day-to-day lives that are, served by the government, right? I mean, right now, passport and your monies and all that stuff is very, very much tied in with these state players. As those things become decoupled, as far as financial transactions, as far as the markets that you participate in on a regular basis, to some extent, the security, the inherent nature of that heightened security with the blockchain and having that digital ledger that should keep that information ideally for forever, as far as whatever took place, it may make us less reliant upon a nation state. And this could set forward we need them less, they're less able to participate in our lives. What if 10 years from now somebody comes out and says, I'm going to create a digital country, right? It's a sovereign country. It's not because I'm, over here in Boulder and I'm saying, this is my little, square acre and I'm going to claim this is my territory. Somebody might create this blockchain, and yeah, you might on paper be a citizen of the United States, but I'm part of blockchain group A that, these are the rights that I have, and this is, the way that things work. So, look, I don't want to sound like I'm just going way off on the deep end here, but what I am saying is that with these technologies, right, let's go back to that quote from that really brilliant guy, I'm just kidding, the quote where I quoted myself, these, like anything that's protocol, process-driven, transactional, could be remade, could be altered. Right? I mean, just as impactful as code was, and took down, all these traditional industries. Who goes to Borders books anymore, right? What if blockchain has that same dynamic to large, state players to some extent? So that's some of the questions that are going to be raised. And look, I'm just coming at this almost more from a futurist perspective, right? Got that history focus as far as I see with my own eyes, my understanding, where were we now? And you can extrapolate. But I think this really does bring to light these questions. When you think about it and keep taking those next steps forward, so will it ultimately take this shape and form? That's hard to say. I mean, nobody can predict the future, and again, there might be some other groundbreaking innovation just out there that completely, like 2 years from now, like blockchain, schmockchain, who cares about that? There's this new thing. Or maybe somehow hackers have attacked it, and it's just not really this secure thing that we think it is, upon which we can build these universes. But assuming that some of those components stay true, that blockchain is the dominant technology as far as remaking these processes, that the inherent security advantages stay intact, and with the permeation and putting these tools in the hands of individuals and people that have whatever their means are, that could radically reshape how things are done, who's doing them, and what our relationship is to those people. So, just my speculation. But so I do think that there's going to be a lot of legislation. I think there's going to be backdoor stuff and all the rest. But certainly people that are wanting to be in control are not going to so easily relinquish that control just because new technologies are taking shape and form. I could see them. I mean, they're already starting to outlaw some cryptocurrencies, and I wouldn't be shocked if at some point they just become much more, emboldened by that if they're not able to, have the insight that they're looking for. If these opaque, these dark markets open up, backed by the blockchain, why would that be any different? Right. So that's probably going to be a lot of area where there's legislation, perhaps efforts to penetrate however they can, whether it's above board or something behind the scenes. And then again, the X factor disruption. As I was saying, I mean, it's not set in stone that blockchain will be the technology, moving forward. Could something else that's even another paradigm shift, further, could that take place? Yeah, perhaps. And of course, as I'm saying, so much of what's really at the heart of why the blockchain's taken off is just that's security component. And if that is somehow breached, or maybe not what we think it is over time, that could have an impact, and of course we're also filtering this information in light of those limitations on blockchain, the latency, the cost for the proof of work, that type of stuff may have some factors as well. So I don't want to say that this is the path, But what I do want to illuminate, and within the scope of this discussion, the audience that I'm speaking to, it really raises some very, very interesting questions, especially regarding personal liberties, especially regarding the role of government in our lives. Let's go to the next slide. And so we're pretty much there, blockchain, powerful tool. I think, it's going to create some volatility, increase this great pace of change that we're already on. I think what we're going to see is a reflection. Society is going to steer what technologies come into our lives, but then the way that impacts our lives, that's going to steer further what these developments. It's going to be essentially a dialogue, a back and forth, between the technology and society. As I've been kind of trying to weave in through the conversation, that impact on our potential for increased personal liberties and reduced role of government. Certainly, with the nature of those technologies, those are really, really key aspects to take in. So that is my presentation. I really appreciate it.
I'd like to wrap up by saying that you only lost 2 people here.
Okay.
You even kept Maris.
Okay.
Yeah, I was about to say congratulations. I think I understand blockchain.
Okay.
I didn't think
My job
anybody
is-
could do it.
Oh, go ahead. Shoot.
Do you see cryptocurrency supplanting gold in the future? 'Cause we have a
maybe.
mess of gold. Should I get rid of it?
I wouldn't be so quick with that. I mean, I think one part is the cryptocurrencies have attracted a lot of attention because of just the
Yeah.
volatility. I mean, it cuts both ways. But I mean, shoot, like what else could you have invested in 2017 in January that was going to achieve a 1,300%? And not that anybody foresaw that was going to be the likely end result. But especially as the year was unfolding, when it got to 3,000, 5,000, 8,000, people were saying, hey, let me jump on this bandwagon.
Right.
This is a great way to maybe turn my dollars into many more.
But it seems so volatile where, gold is...
And that's an attraction, the volatility, but also going to be, somewhat of a deterrent depending on, and I think it's going to come down to people's, their own financial, interest, what they're trying to accomplish, their sense of risk. So I think we're going to be living in a multi kind of currency or a monetary world where gold is going to be there, e-currencies, traditional currencies, but it's going to be much more fluid, potentially, especially with these technologies, as how you may trade it, in and out of them.
I have one more quick question.
Go for it.
And this is purely personal because I like to invest in the stock market. Do you see any opportunities in this blockchain technology for investing?
Yeah, like I said, to me, if I'm looking to do something in the space right now, I'm not a currency trader. I think,
No, it wouldn't be.
there might be some coin that really takes off, and that might be the horse to ride for a while. But I think we've already seen Bitcoin kind of do that, and now there's just too much noise in the mix, and really hard to kind of sort of see what's what. So the currency right now, I'm not quite as bullish on. I think where the big gains are, like I would be an investor in a startup that's leveraging blockchain technologies. For me, there's a sweet spot within real estate, and there's certainly already talks I'm having with different groups. I'm talking with a developer potentially about something in that realm. That's what excites me, and that would be. It's like. Almost reminds me of like the .com era, where nowadays like an ICO or some blockchain technology. There's even an iced tea company that added blockchain to the end of their name as they're trading on whatever trading platform they're on, and their valuation increased like 70% or something. So there's a lot of hype.
Well, I was thinking more like the hardware point, like NVIDIA or some company like that does research into the actual.
Yeah, NVIDIA actually is a good buy for precisely that reason. You hit the nail on the head on that one.
Go ahead.
NVIDIA.
I do have friends who trade in Bitcoin, and now that the Bitcoin is tradable like any other commodity on the commodity Chicago Mercantile Exchange and one other exchange, trading Bitcoin, both going long and short. Like I said, I've got friends who are making good money doing it. So that certainly is happening, but right now there is kind of a gold rush mentality in that people are trying to figure out which cryptocurrency to go into. But just like in the original gold rush, it's the pick and shovel
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
The
That-
guys
that's
selling
where the money
the
is.
denim jeans, and
And so,
yeah.
yes, NVIDIA is one of those.
And I
pictures
can
showing-
buy it on the stock exchange.
Yes.
I can't buy these currencies except buy it with a wallet of some sort.
No, we know you can buy Bitcoin in the on the Chicago Mercantile Exchange and one other exchange as well. So you can trade it just like any other commodity. All you need is a commodity account.
And Coinbase might be a place to check out too, as far as a digital
Coinbase, I read
platform.
about that.
Yeah.
Could you tell me what you mean by code? I think I understand code. You use the term code. You say,
Software, so
Okay.
as Ralph was saying, like Ruby or C++ or whichever language,
okay.
they're writing, to create blockchain or create a coin. So when I say like anybody can do this as long as they know how to code. I mean, if you're technical and you can create software, software used to be. You're creating a traditional kind of centralized database,
Okay.
and now hey, I might not be looking to do that. I'm looking to use my coding experience, my talents, my skills as far as writing code to create a blockchain technology. So it's almost just basically the language in which the tool is written. To me, code is like the figurative version of like the brick and mortar, to build a building or build a
Okay.
business, right?
Brick and mortar is a kind of code.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
So that's how we
Okay.
create whatever we're looking to create.
And I believe that wraps it up. I do ask for those who are here to kick in a couple, $3 towards the Libertarian Party so that we can continue these efforts and buy the equipment and do other such things that are so critical to enhancing freedom. Phil, thank you so much. That was absolutely
Yes, it was.
fascinating.
Very good.
You are really, really good.
Thank you.
And with that, I'm stopping the